joins Rockin' Minute with Jimmy B on ESPN 620.
How are we doing today, Rick? What's going on?
I'm doing wonderfully. How are you?
Doing well. I'm just this whole SEC rumored departure from the NCAA. Is it real momentum or is it just smoke? What is it with the SEC?
Well, you know that the SEC, and to a lesser extent, but only slightly, the Big Ten have flexed their muscles as the most powerful entities in college sports. But then you've got, the Big 12 and the ACC right behind them. And it's not smoke in the sense that there has to be some resolution of how these entities exist and coexist. Problem is that you don't know what the first chicken and egg issue is really going to be. For example, are we talking about waiting for the House settlement relative to paying athletes? How does NIL impact all of this? I know a lot of existing and former athletic directors. You know I do. And it's a time where the worst fear is the uncertainty. Everybody can plan for things as long as they know what the outcome ultimately could be, but nobody really knows what it is today.
So your gut, you've seen this thing over and over the years. There's been so many changes from UPI to AP to BCS to everything that's going on. And that's just football we're talking about. But is there some traction that the SEC and maybe they bring the Big Ten with them and do something like this?
Well, that's the issue. Do you bring them with them? Do you do it alone? What happens to the other two, the Big Four? What happens to the non-Power Four, Power Five conferences? The SEC is clearly now making noises as the kind of spokesman for conferences. And then you would assume that everybody else kind of comes along. The SEC is a lot different than it was years ago. Who'd have thought that if you talk to Joe Castiglione in Oklahoma, who's a good friend, just for example, that he'd be working with and in some ways speaking about and for the SEC. And so you've got a lot of these schools, therefore, with what probably is the most powerful conference in college football. But do they get to speak for college football? Well, who does? Nobody does right now.
When it comes to college basketball, Charlie Baker, the NCAA president, is floating the idea of a proposed expansion of the basketball tournament from 68 to either 72 or 76. And it could happen as early as next year. Do you think this has got a potential of happening?
Well, while we're at it, why don't we expand college football playoff?
Yeah.
Talking about that. While we're at it, why don't we expand to make sure that no one's left behind? I would propose we expand the college NCAA tournament to about 300. Maybe that'll give us some way to not get anybody upset. But in all seriousness, it's a series of interlocked negotiations. It's TV with the rights deal. It's the college basketball playoff. At least we're starting with a number that is, 68 is a pretty big number.
Yeah.
So, if you add 10 to the 68, it's hardly major impact. It does add people to that first week. So that first week of the play-in games, if you only have 4, do you have 18 or 16? So, we have a structure, but what are we going to do with it?
So, Rick, as Rock alluded to, a lot of the revenue sharing expansion of the playoffs and football and basketball, what have you, the meetings this week in reference to revenue sharing decisions, and also with the suit coming down and what they're going to have to do, how are they going to look to allocate those monies? What decisions need to be made in reference to being on par with every school, or it will be different for every school?
Well, it may be different for every school, but hopefully that won't happen, because that's going to make everybody a lot more. The compromise is going to be a lot more difficult. The agreements are going to be a lot more difficult. You don't want to set up a system where the haves and the have-nots are able to expand what they end up doing. And let's not forget, while we're at it, we have women's sports, critical with Title IX and beyond. And obviously, let's call them the niche sports. We don't call them that anymore. We call them Olympic sports. But, it's still really relevant. So it's the most incredible game of three-dimensional chess I think we've ever seen.
And we are far from it being over as well, Rick. Look, it's just going to continue like this. Do you see it staying chaotic for the next 3 years at least?
Yeah, at least a couple, maybe then three.
Okay.
What are the dominoes falling? As we said, the first one falling is the House versus NCAA, that settlement. Then we see the other opportunities for revenue sharing, and then we see the existing playoff contracts in football, and obviously the large deal with TNT and Turner and CBS on the basketball side. So yeah, 3 years might be the right number.
So what are these meetings like? You laid out some behemoths of decisions to be made, Rick. So these conferences with the ADs this week, I mean, is it pretty much okay? We can take this on this year, this on next year, and as Jimmy alluded to, I mean, there's so much on the table there. What's the priority?
Well, a lot of it's out of their control, meaning, I keep coming back to this big settlement, the payment of athletes. You talk about 20 million or so per school or maybe more. That's a big number. And obviously priority has to be first in line, meaning how do you get the revenues to coincide with what the courts are going to tell you have to pay? Then you're going to talk about conference musical chairs, not just the teams in the conferences, but moving in and out of the NCAA. President Emmert had it right. He had a general statement 3 years ago saying, hey, we ought to have college athletes paid, and stay tuned for my memo. And then he got out. So, God bless him.
Hey, Rick, with ESPN kind of scaling down baseball coverage, you think that'll hurt some of the mid-market teams like Arizona?
Well,
it may go more streaming, so which would change a lot.
Yeah, well, but it's also who replaces them, and we all understand Scripps is a major player. We've got maybe 3 or 4 alternatives. You stay with the post Bally's numbers. In a lot of the cases, they do it and re-up. Then the other
about 3 minutes.
Organization that's trying to grab as much as they can. They got the 2 big hockey franchises down here. You got them committed to Scripps. That's Florida and Tampa. Then you look at self-production and self-streaming. You got that with Major League Baseball's help. But again, everybody's going in a different direction, and all of those teams have to look out for themselves first.
Rick, speaking of Florida, they are dominating the National Hockey League last 7 years in a row. It has been Florida that has been in the Stanley Cup Finals, either Tampa Bay or the Panthers. The Panthers are back, the defending champions. So what's in the water? Is it players get tired of living in cold weather cities, and so now they go to Florida because of A, lifestyle, and B, those teams are good?
Well, those teams are good. You go for lifestyle. You forgot sales tax and income tax.
That's right.
You forgot we have no income tax here.
It.
And so, if it was in the water, the Marlins wouldn't suck. You like that?
Other markets? Have you used that in other markets?
If it's in the water, the Dolphins wouldn't be historically mediocre.
Okay.
I know the Heat's won, 3 times, and that's because of the players they had. So I understand that, get ready for another Stanley Cup series. I find it ultimately ironic as one of the guys that was involved in the kind of creation of the Panthers in the early 90s, that now we have a ho-hum mentality. Another year in the Stanley Cup? So what? People couldn't believe that. That's just unreal.
Vegas or Florida wins last year, Vegas before that. These Sunbelt states. And anything you're hearing about Arizona, Phoenix, maybe getting back into the game? Maybe we could get an NHL team.
Yeah, the rumor is that they're going to move to Utah. Oh, that's already happened.
Oh, okay.
How's that?
We already found out Morello sold his house yesterday for like $30 million, so he's gone. So
yeah,
probably
what does that tell you? Although, clearing out of town, I get that. But I'm the one thing that I continue to be impressed with Gary Bettman, to be honest about it, is that he doesn't give up on places easily. If you've seen some of his rhetoric, he's now saying that Atlanta could be, should be a hockey town, because that was then, this is now, as far as changed circumstances. But I wouldn't count on him to start advocating Arizona just yet until you have a real arena deal done.
Rick, we just lost Jim Irsay, Colts owner, and reading the stories
Clear to wrap.
as far as the players and the city. Didn't realize how impactful he was. Is doing so much for the city. I just wanted to see if you had any dealings with Jim Irsay and your response to the city of Indianapolis losing their owner.
A lot of dealings with Jim Irsay. God bless Jim Irsay, Pete Ward, his right-hand guy, the whole family, Meg Irsay, everybody. I knew him as part of the whole moving from Baltimore, but I knew him as part of the preparations for the 2012 Super Bowl, for Lucas Oil, for the renovation of Lucas Oil, for the public money that was involved in it. And he put Indianapolis first. He will absolutely be missed, a good friend.
Rick, have yourself a great weekend, buddy. Thanks for the time today.
All right, man. Talk to you next week.
That's
Bye.
Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Follow him at Rick Horrow on X or Horrow Sports Ventures. You can just Google that too. Well, coming up, Sean Green, 6 for 6, 4-homer day. Still ranks as one of baseball's wildest stat lines. And MJ's flu game, 38 points, was one epic legacy. We're going to talk about that, and then some football at 50.